It's an annual Thanksgiving tradition, and for the last 3.5 decades, Survivor Series for the WWE has filled us with a ton of memories. Some good memories, some bad memories. Now, what started as a single elimination, 4-on-4 or 5-on-5 type of theme quickly evolved into generalized storylines, main events, blow-off matches, title matches, Montreal Screwjobs, elimination chambers, and most recently, war games. Well, we're here to talk Survivor Series memories, and hopefully all of you are stuffed full and not hungover from Thanksgiving if you're in the United States. But with that, hi once again, everyone. My name's Ken, and this is a Toy Connections online live stream, or TKO, broadcasting to you. And if I haven't already said it, happy Thanksgiving to our friends down south in the United States. So last night was literally right down to the day, the 35th anniversary of the WWE Survivor Series. And it just dawned on me, and I'll bring our good buddy Ryan on here in a moment. It just dawned on me that, hey, you know what? It'd be great to talk about some memories, some of the favorite things that we've encountered during Survivor Series, maybe some of the things we didn't like. You know, how's wrestling been recently, and what are the things that we think of first when we talk about the Survivor Series? But you know what? He's with me a lot on this channel, so you can subscribe to him on the Island of Misfit Toy Collectors, the link of which is in the description below. Ryan Sweeney, Dreadnok Ryan, welcome back to TKO, buddy.
How are you, sir? Good morning, everyone. Afternoon, wherever you're at in this fine world that we live in.
Absolutely. Well, a few people are talking World Cup this on this fine day. So Canada is actually taking it to Croatia as we speak, and it was 1-0 Canada when I turned it off. Thanks to Gazz for letting me know it was on, because I was still in the midst of waking up. I know I'm not a soccer guy, but I've been enjoying the FIFA Uncovered documentary. Right, and with Canada doing well and me not knowing any of the players' names, I feel a bit weird, because if it were hockey, I'd be all over it, as you know, and you would be too. So
yep, we're those niche sports like fans. Hey, I will say this: Michigan beat Ohio State yesterday, which was the first time that Michigan had beat Ohio State at Ohio State since 2000. So it's been 22 years. So congratulations to the Michigan Wolverines off to the championship game. So
I used to actually watch college football for the Michigan Wolverines, and it's because my dad went to a University of Washington. So I actually grew up as a little bit of a Huskies fan. So I never actually told you that. I realized that.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, and apparently we're down 2-1 right now to Canada's down 2-1 right now to Croatia, but that's expected. Like, Croatia's a strong World Cup team, relatively speaking, compared to everybody else.
Yeah, and World Cup seems the more stuff that comes out about with what's going on, it's like, oh, this is really, there's a lot of scandals. It's kind of not good.
The whole Sepp Blatter thing, as I didn't know a lot of this. I read about it a little bit just in the news, etc. But as I watched FIFA Uncovered, I was like, wow, the extent of this is deep. And, you know, our buddy Gazz has told us a few of these things in the past, but I didn't know who a lot of these people were. And as you watch the 4-part documentary, and I'm not quite at the end yet, I'm about 10-15 minutes into the last episode, you know, it's really interesting. It's really well filmed, and you learn a lot, and it's like, wow. So anyway, shall we say hello to the chat? Absolutely. Jim Largo first on here and wants to learn more about wrestling trivia, and he was just backstage with us on the joint Slaughterhouse Toy Connections members and patrons live stream. So good to see him there. Dale Santaford saying good old JR here.
Hey, Dale.
Always like that. Yep. TJC, it's evening over in Europe, but he's able to make it live, so good there. And as well as also from Europe, we got Boba Hicks. And Nolan says, hopefully everyone's had a good weekend. Danjamin905 is in the house. And Gaz is here with his Ralph emojis and has reminded us that Canada is down 2-1, unfortunately, but that's okay. I never expected to beat Croatia. And Pure Wrestling TV is on because, well, as the name says, wrestling talk, right? Jabbar Robbins said he's watched Survivor Series War Games last night, and he actually enjoyed the women's match. That's the match I didn't get to see because it was early on in the card. But Yeah, look, and right away we got some memories right here. Bubba Hicks likes the opening match of '94 when Diesel tore through an opposing team before turning on him and Shawn Michaels. Yes, that buildup of Diesel going face was quite big. But we'll get into that right here. So, I mean, I thought about talking about last night's Survivor Series right away, but I think I'd like to lead into that and think more about the history, because a lot of when I look at the age demographic on my YouTube analytics, it seems like a lot of people are in the age group where they would have grown up with sort of the glory years of Hulkamania through to the Attitude Era. So I think I'm going to start there today. And when we talk about Survivor Series, one of the things that a lot of people seem to forget or not realize is that the Survivor Series was initially conceived as an opponent to the National Wrestling Alliance's Starrcade, which I know you know, Ryan. And I mean, maybe we'll jump into that first before I get into some of the main questions. And I know anyone who may be wondering in the chat, Justin Dillon from the Wrestling Classic is supposed to join us. He says he's a little bit behind. He was out late last night. Totally okay, Justin. Get to us when you can. But when Jim Crockett Promotions had Starrcade, because that was kind of the big event, right? Like that was their WrestleMania. And let's talk a little bit about this, because by 1987, WrestleMania 3 was huge. And then Vince McMahon says, screw it. I'm going to put an event on the same night as Starrcade. Anybody, any cable company that chooses to carry Starrcade, you are not eligible for WrestleMania 4. And he kind of cornered them to carry the Survivor Series that night instead. Why don't you weigh in a little bit on that?
Well, you know, in the history of professional wrestling for us in our generation, in 1980 and above, okay, WWE was the place. Vince bought up all the territories. When he bought up all the territories, he took all the talent with him to WWE or WWF. And the only one that was really left was Jim Crockett. I apologize, my dog.
That's okay. It's okay.
No, not really, because he knows better. But he's being a heel right now, folks. That's what we call it. But Jim Crockett was the only one that was left to compete with him. And Crockett had a lot of great talent. The Four Horsemen, Steamboat, Steamboat left to go to WWE, but he had, you know, Magnum TA. He had a lot of good talent that could fill in. And what they needed, though, is they needed that pay-per-view, because that's that big draw. They saw by what Vince did with WrestleMania. And for them, Starrcade was going to be that big event where they could make a lot of money. Dusty versus Flair, all of that stuff. And Vince being that Vince being the business person that he is, said, I'm going to blackmail these people and say, you're not going to carry WrestleMania if you carry Starrcade, because he couldn't see that having two competing companies would actually be good for business. He thought if he owned everything, that's best for WWE, but it's really not, in my opinion.
It's best for the fans, but as we saw when Ted Turner bought out, I guess he bought out Jim Crockett Promotions and some other organizations. He may have bought Georgia Championship Wrestling too.
And that was all part of it. All part of
yeah,
Crockett's.
like he got a conglomerate deal of sorts. Ended up with WCW, and as you can see, he actually ended up. Vince always said he nearly declared bankruptcy when Nitro came on the air and WCW was beating him. So for him, from a business perspective, I think he didn't want the competition for that. We as fans benefited. He benefited by the end, but there were a few stressful years there where Vince wasn't sure if he was going to make it past a certain year. Hence Survivor Series, Montreal Screwjob, and having to get rid of Bret's salary, right? Which, you know, we all have quite a lot of feelings, hard feelings on right up to this day, right?
But with Vince, what he didn't understand is, because of what he did by buying up all those territories, is when you buy up all the competition, you destroy a fan base. Because to me personally, and I'll say this, Southern style wrestling is what I prefer over the Northeast, the Japanese style. I prefer that old school Southern wrestling. And that was a hotbed for wrestling fans. And when, WCCW disappeared, when Mid-South disappeared, when Georgia Championship Wrestling disappeared, Dallas, all of those started to go away. They didn't want to watch WWE with the superhero cartoonish type wrestlers. They wanted those real storylines. Jerry Lawler versus Andy Kaufman, for example. People thought that was real. And that's what makes wrestling so awesome, is you can suspend the belief that it's fake. It's, that the outcomes are real, and you just buy into the entertainment of it.
Absolutely. And you're right, because people who grew up with Lou Thez, people who grew up with Vern Gagne, the Von Erichs, they were not used to the style that Vince was going to give them, right? That cartoony way. There were a lot of people who were like, this is not wrestling. If you're like me and you got exposed to wrestling during the 80s because of WWE, that becomes your wrestling. And I remember just talking to friends overseas. Some people, like I had a friend who had brothers who were much older than him, and they would talk to me about this stuff during the New Generation era. And I'd mention Razor Ramon and 1-2-3 Kid, and they'd be like, yeah, but you should have seen the Von Erichs in their prime. And I was like, oh, I did. I saw Texas Tornado. And they're like, no, that was the Von Erichs on the downcline. I'm like, no, he was so cool. They're like, no, you should have seen the whole Von Erich family. Since you mentioned WCCW and the territory days, that's what came up, right?
So. Gino Fernandez, the fabulous Freebirds, just the people they had going through that. And Steve Austin, Undertaker, they both got their start there. Percy Pringle, which is Paul Bearer for The Undertaker, they all got their starts right there in WCCW. And Memphis for a lot of them as well, too. Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett. They got their, a lot of folks got their starts in those, and that's where they learned that crazy style of booking.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's just it, right? Anyway, go ahead.
With WWE 2 or WWF, Vince was able to pick the top talent from all of those territories. Mm-hmm. When you had the territory system, wrestlers could learn their gimmicks, but then they could stay there for so long until they could see the writing on the wall, like, I need to move to a new territory so that it could stay fresh. Mm-hmm. And you didn't get bored of the Roman Reigns versus Drew McIntyre for the 6th time, or the Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar for the 15th time. You could move people in and out, and they stayed fresh. When we had WCW and WWE during the Monday Night Wars, you had talent that was going back and forth, and that helped keep the excitement going.
Yes, absolutely. Now, oh man, I mean, just trying to collect my thoughts a little bit here, because like we're in the inception phase of of this particular discussion, but Vince was so focused on that national dominance. He kind of threw out what came before, but you kind of knew that, because like as he's buying up, as he's buying up talent from the other territories, he's already breaking all the agreements, all the pre-established grandfathered agreements, right? And I think, I can't remember who said it in the True Story of WrestleMania documentary, that if Vince Sr. knew what Vince was trying to do, he would have been rolling in his grave. But if he knew what he accomplished, he would have been proud. So,
I think Vince Sr. knew the importance of having the territories, because Vince Sr. was able to loan out Andre, and you would get a booking fee. So even though Andre was going to all these different territories, Vince Sr. was still getting money off of it. And then Andre doesn't get boring to the New York market, because he can travel all over the world, and it just exposes more people to the WWF. Or back then it was what, WWWF.
So, and before that it was what was it called? It was when Vince Sr. like before they changed to WWF, it was like, oh, it's gonna bug me now, because there was a name even before that. It was the Capital Wrestling something. Anyway, yeah. And Pre-Wrestling TV says yes. I do. We're aware that they did buy out Georgia Championship Wrestling in '84, but somehow I don't know if Georgia Championship Wrestling got sold back or not, or if it was just the time slot of the TV that was sold back.
He bought the time slot, and
Yes.
that kicked them off television.
Yes.
But what Vince didn't know was people who turned into TBS or TNT, they were used to a certain type of wrestling. And when it was the WWE in these, big arenas and stuff, people stopped watching it. So that was Vince getting the, hey, people in this area, the South, they don't like watching this stuff. They want what they had before. That's
right.
what allowed Crockett to come in there and get that TV time slot, because cable television was so important to any promotion, because that's what helped generate the buzz for your shows when you'd start going and doing your tours.
Right.
Vince also understood the paydays from WrestleMania, that he needed to get more pay-per-views on the calendar. So then you start seeing the evolution of, more and more of his pay-per-views coming out, because, millions and millions of dollars was being generated, plus the video sales and closed circuit TV and all of that stuff as well too.
Fair enough. And you're right, and there was also that transition between closed circuit to pay-per-view. And I heard it wasn't until Mania 4 that they actually aired exclusively on pay-per-view. Jabbar Robbins asks us, what do we think of Billy Corgan running the NWA? I haven't been following the NWA. All I know is that he runs it, so I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. I don't know about you, Ryan, but yeah.
Look, Billy worked with, I believe, TNA for a short time. He tried to help unbury that dumpster fire at the time. He's a big wrestling fan. I'm a little bit upset that he lost. Oh God, now I can't think of his name. He's married to Mickie James.
Oh yeah, I
hate that.
As well.
But you're losing some of those stars. He also embraced Matt Cardona, which was smart.
Yes,
Matt Cardona was really hot over the summer. The NWA has the name and the history. I just don't know if it has staying power. I think MLW is a little bit better than the NWA, but that's me.
And Nick Aldis, that's who we're thinking of.
Nick, thank you. Yeah. Love Nick Aldis.
That's exactly who I was. The name was on the tip of my tongue. I completely forgot, because I know he was part of not AEW, but that All In pay-per-view. I think he was a big part of that. Yeah,
he's been part of Ring of Honor and a number of different promotions. English wrestler, really talented person. I don't understand why he's not gotten a shot at the big time. So,
sometimes you just can't get your breaks, right?
He's such a good talent, though. That's the scary thing.
I know. Going back throughout the whole history, is there a specific Survivor Series memory that you have as a favorite?
Yeah, so Dylan is my son, and he was supposed to join us today too, but he's got something that came up. But we went through and watched a number of Survivor Series matches, and this is going to sound stupid, but it was Survivor Series 1. They had a tag team Survivor Series match. So it was the Hart Foundation, the Bulldogs, the Killer Bees. It was just all of their tag teams. But we watched that in Paul Roma, and it was the Young Stallions, and seeing guys sell, seeing the Islanders, and it was like, this had to be one of my favorite matches because of just how it went down. Like, Strikeforce was the tag team champions. They were the first one eliminated. It was just, you got to see wrestlers who knew their craft, knew how to put a match together, knew how to work the crowd, and had the spots and the finish that all made sense. And I'm like, for a tag team match, that was, with how we see tag team type matches now, where it's just a free-for-all, the referee had control of the entire match. When the heels would cheat. The referee had their back turned because they were stopping the good guys from coming in. It was crisp, clean, and perfect, and they worked so well together. It had to be one of my favorite matches. The second part, which is going to be kind of silly, is when Undertaker was Ted DiBiase's secret partner, and they made him look like $1 million to start out. But what they did is they had him and Dusty get disqualified.
Yep.
So neither one of them took a pin.
Yep.
And then they could continue the match on, and it helped build the storyline. So those are probably two of my favorite of the earlier matches. But yeah, that's what I miss with professional wrestling, is just the experience that all of these guys in the ring had. I mean, you know, when Undertaker's your greenest person, what does that tell you?
Well, that's the thing, right? And he had a little bit of experience in WCCW before, and this is after his days as Mean Mark Callis. To which, whenever people say that a dream match would have been Sting versus Taker, well, Surfer Sting did fight Mean Mark Callis, even if Undertaker never fought the Crow Sting. But so I pulled this up because I'm glad you mentioned this. Well, first off, when I first saw that, if we go back to 87, before this particular one, before this particular Survivor Series, when I saw the 10-team tag team match, you got 20 wrestlers on the apron or in the ring. And I was like, man, they're going to lose control. And they didn't, right? That ended up being a pure wrestling match instead of the tire fire it could have been. Everyone was well coordinated. Now, you touched on 3 years later at this particular Survivor Series. This is the match that sticks out to me the most in 1990 Survivor Series. And it's because, I mean, like, yeah, we had a gobbledygooker, which was a little weird. More than a little weird. Poor, I think Hector Guerrero had to dress up as the gobbledygooker, so poor Guerrero. And then the end of the night on this one, this is the one where they had the Grand Survivors finale, where they had like all the heel survivors and all the face survivors faced off in a second match at the end. And this match here, like you said, they couldn't quite put Taker over because he was green. They couldn't let Dusty win because of the storyline. So they had them both double counted out. And I think that was a bit of a mess because I don't think either one was the legal man when it happened, but they had to do something, and it must have been an audible on the spot. But back then we still suspended our belief in wrestling. So while that part can be a bit weird to watch in hindsight, in real time it wasn't as bad back then. But what I really liked about this match is it came down to DiBiase versus Bret. And we hadn't seen Bret truly shine yet as a single star. And he took it to DiBiase. And I remember watching this and being like, man, this Bret Hart guy's pretty good. And obviously we all know he became my favorite wrestler of all time. But this was my first like real exposure to like, he's part of a tag team. And he's taking it to DiBiase. And he's really exciting to watch. And he's selling really well. And he's smooth in the ring. And his brother Dean had just died either the night before or the same weekend. Yep. And he's fighting through those emotions as well. And he's already here at this event. So he's not going back home for that. And it's a wrestling family. They're not going to let him come back on the night of his potential big break. And I'll never forget the ending, because I think Bret came off of the ropes and tried to hit DiBiase with a splash, and then DiBiase flipped him over and grabbed the tights and pinned him for a 3. And everyone kind of going, whoa, the Hitman just took the fight to DiBiase. You know, that's a legit main eventer. And that kind of helped skyrocket his career. Yep. And he talks about it in his book a little bit. So that's what I really like about this. And you got the debut of The Undertaker, managed by Brother Love before Paul Bearer came along, right? And then, of course, DiBiase goes to the grand finale match of Survival and gets beaten by Hogan, Warrior, and Tito Santana that night. So I really enjoy the 1990 Survivor Series. Gobbledygooker aside, this is a rewatchable pay-per-view for me. Right. Yeah,
and to me, the first 3 are probably my favorites. And I'm going to say my unpopular opinion. I don't care for the Ultimate Warrior. Mm-hmm. And when he teamed with, was it the Road Warriors and
Kerry Von Erich?
Kerry Von Erich. Thank you. Yeah, we were talking about
it was all the Warriors, Road Warriors, Modern Day Warrior, and Ultimate Warrior. I think that was kind of the joke theme.
It's just you watch like okay. The Road Warriors, or whatever they called them in WWE,
Legion of Doom.
Yeah, I'm sorry, they're the Road Warriors. Those guys have literally a pop named after them. It's the Road Warrior pop, and the crowd, they got into it. They popped for him. Kerry Von Erich, of course, at this point, it was at the downturn of his career, but he still looked like $1 million. And then it's just when the Ultimate Warrior had the really fluffy Farrah Fawcett type hair going on, and they're cutting the promo, and he's like, and you're like, oh God.
I know.
I really just don't care for this guy. He's such a poser. But watching the Road Warriors work, it's, again, this is a big pay-per-view for all of them. And even with Bret versus Ted DiBiase, the one thing I'm forgetting to talk about is, for the first few, it was Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse the Body Ventura.
That's correct.
Commentators. And man, do you miss how much those commentators can add to those matches just by what they say or how they phrase, a certain, to help advance the storyline by like, oh, so-and-so did this. And, and with the 90s, it was Rowdy Roddy Piper, and he came out and he said, Bret's here. He lost his brother, and he put over a spoon. But Piper, just the wit and how quickly he was putting these one-liners out, and you're just like, it's just, it was the top echelon of talent that was on there. And the managers, you had Bobby Heenan, you had Slick, you had, Brother Love,
Jimmy Hart.
Yeah. And when the managers would interfere in the matches to help their talent win, it all made sense when they would do it. And listening to Jimmy Hart, on the megaphone, come on, Bret, baby, you got to do this. It just continued to make you believe more and more in, you're just being sucked into this match and you're fully invested.
Absolutely. And I mean, you're talking about that conglomerate and that sort of like the organic nature of how everyone sort of like came together in this perfect storm. The vibrant colors didn't seem out of place because that was where we were in pop culture. That was where we were in our history. Right. Gazz agrees with you. Piper was the best, his number one favorite of all time. There we go. Right. And a great heel and a great baby face. That was the one thing he could do. Never got a run with the world title, or did he get one in the indies before WWE? I'm not sure. I know he got an intercontinental title run at WrestleMania before Mania 8. But I don't think he ever got he never won the big one.
Hogan owned the WWE Championship again because it was a different era. You didn't have the hot shot booking where you would take that title off. And the other thing with Piper is he never needed the title to get over.
No, he never did. He never did. And when you think about that era, Macho, I think, only got that first title reign because Hogan had to go film No Holds Barred. If not for that, then yeah, I mean, we always talk about magical times early on in our youth. The first three Survivor Series, I mean, you're talking 87, 88, 89 as your favorites, right? I started with 1990. But that single elimination concept, I think they realized they couldn't sustain that model because it wasn't resulting in the blow-off feuds that they wanted. I think they started that as a theme and then eventually just switched it to, okay, we'll do a few of these, but we're also going to do actual like singles matches and whatnot. And that's kind of what's helped Survivor Series thrive to this day. Tell me what you think about where does Survivor Series, like, how does it stack up for you compared to the other pay-per-views in your annual calendar cycle? Because Mania is always big, and the road to Mania begins with the Rumble. And it's like people forget Survivor Series was the second ever WWE pay-per-view. It's older than the Rumble.
Yeah. So there, in my opinion, there are four. Okay. And if I'm looking at WWE, it's Mania, SummerSlam, Rumble, and Survivor Series. Okay. Those are my
R.I.P. King of the Ring. Yes.
yeah. Well, and King of the Ring is just a gimmick, right? But
Yes.
Mania and SummerSlam, just where they're paced, they're the biggest two shows of the year where they're supposed to be.
They're supposed to be.
Rumble is that gets you to Mania. Survivor Series is let's take care of all the bad blood we have and move on. So
Yes.
to me, my favorites as a fan, WrestleMania is, of course, pomp and circumstance, which it's just it's the Super Bowl, right?
Yes.
So it's great, but my two favorites are the Royal Rumble and Survivor Series. They've always been
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Well, in the first one, so it's Hogan versus Andre, right? The two teams. But
Yeah.
you got to have you don't want Andre and Hulk to have to face one another because you need that to continue, right?
Yes.
So
And that's why Bam Bam got to be put over. I almost forgot to mention this. Right?
Yeah, and Bundy got Hogan disqualified. That's how you can continue. And I'm talking with my hands, so I'll stop because I got you about that.
Yeah.
But that helps build those feuds because then you can stop and say, I was going to win Survivor Series, but yet you stopped it. Like when Undertaker and Dusty, that would have been a great feud to see continued on and done something with. But with Andre, that allowed Andre to get over and win without having Hogan take the pin. And then Hogan comes back and then starts beating on Andre afterwards. And that helped continue their feud. So
well,
I think, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I kind of expected when I first saw that Survivor Series, which would have been on VHS closer to 1990 for me. I kind of just expected Hogan to be the sole survivor. So when he got taken out and Andre was left with Bam Bam and we saw Bam Bam like have to play acrobat to try to keep up with Andre, I was really surprised to see that. So,
and unfortunately you could see how Andre was at the tail end of his career just because he couldn't move as well as he used to be able to. I think you hit on a great point. So for me to watch Mania, to watch Royal Rumble, we never bought the pay-per-views because it was just too much money back then, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when they would come out at the video store, you're in line to make sure that you're getting those copies when you can go
calling to reserve. I used to do that all the time. Call to reserve it for a Friday or a Saturday.
And that was the fun thing because then you call your buddies over and you guys would watch your wrestling and you just rewatch it, watch it again 2 or 3 times. Like, oh, did you see it? That's what I think was great too. Is now we have Peacock. It's on the cock, but I miss those days of having to wait or buy that pay-per-view, having buds over and watching it all together. Now it's an app and you just, you tell your TV, turn on this, and then you watch it. And it's just missing something. It's missing the importance, I think, of that whole, being a pay-per-view, being a big pay-per-view. I wish WWE would say, we're going to offer you live entertainment on Peacock, but we're going to do WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, Survivor Series, and SummerSlams as true pay-per-views again.
It's hard to go back. It's hard to go back though. We're in such an era now where if like you and your son, if you wanted to stream something and you wanted to just binge watch Survivor Series for 3 days straight, you could, right?
Yeah, but I'm not saying you can't add them on afterwards. But if you want to watch them live, just to add some, if AEW can do their pay-per-views at like $40 or $50, I think WWE could. I think by putting it on Peacock, it gives them a way to not put the effort into the programs.
Okay, that's true. That's true because they know that people if they phone it in, people are getting it as part of the subscription anyway. So they're getting the viewership anyway. And I'm just going to say what up to Ostradamus Toys here because I got to meet him face-to-face on StreamYard for the first time on Mega J's channel the other night. I did the usual thing where Mega J was streaming at 1 a.m. in the morning his time. I jump into the chat, say hello, Mega J. He's already got Oz on there. Mega J's like, I'm sending you a StreamYard link. I'm in bed like this watching the FIFA documentary, or I'm about to. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going on. So that was That was my Friday night. When I said I was a little tired yesterday, I did it to myself.
Why?
Right, this is why, and of course I say that, and of course where they are relative to the coast, it's even later their time. So here I am whining about staying up late, and they're up even later. But yeah, I'm gonna jump ahead a few years because I know that this is the elephant in the room, and not this comment, but I mean, I mean, everyone knows we're going to talk about it anyway. We're 35 minutes into the broadcast, and I know everybody's watching World Cup, and they're going to be like, Ken, I didn't know you were on, because it happened to me last week too, but that's okay. We do this for passion, number one. But the elephant in the room, I'm going to flash that up, and I'm going to go quiet for a second and let you vamp for a second.
How do you destroy wrestling but make it grow? It's the phoenix rising from the ashes. But the problem with all of this is that Vince you basically killed two people's careers, almost three, in one night by doing this.
Yes.
Number one, Shawn Michaels was not mentally there. Chemically, he was unbalanced because of, drug problems, alcohol problems. He's not going to be the guy who you can depend on like you did with Bret.
Yes.
Number two, so you basically take your two biggest stars and ruin them because now Bret's going to WCW. He spits in Vince's eye. He writes WCW, and, Shawn Michaels looks like a complete and utter idiot for what happened. You expose the business. Also, Vince can come out on Monday Night Raw and say, I didn't screw Bret. Bret screwed Bret. He burned his business down in one night. And luckily for him, he had Steve Austin, who was catching fire. And the best thing that Steve could have is that heel he could run against.
Yes.
And it was Vince McMahon. That's what launched the Attitude Era. But you killed two great talents who I think if Vince could have figured out a way of just working with Bret and getting over whatever it was, having Bret and Steve face further down the line, or maybe having Bret finally make that real big heel turn and be part of the corporation would have been even better. It's just such a waste, just an absolute waste of talent and all the money you used to build up both of these guys.
Yeah. I was a teenager when this happened, and I remember watching it by myself on pay-per-view in my parents' bedroom. And something felt really off that night because Vince was an announcer all the way up until this point. That night, I realized right off the bat, Jim Ross gave the introduction, no Vince at ringside. What's going on here? We'd seen the news reports, at least on the internet, about Bret going to WCW just literally in the days leading up to this. So me as a massive Bret Hart fan, was still trying to process all this. This match starts, and there's that whole skirmish outside of the ring. Vince has to get them into the ring. When Shawn puts Bret in the sharpshooter, one thing I noticed after Earl rang the bell was there were still a few minutes left in the pay-per-view. And I'm looking at the clock going, why did it end so quickly, right? And I know they're supposed to trick us into thinking that Bret gave up. And I'm sitting there like, well, but there's no real celebration after. There's no Shawn posing in the ring while Bret does the honors and rolls out sort of unceremoniously. Triple H just sort of comes to ringside to, like, you know, add as extra security. Vince has Sarge there, and Sarge has made clear when we were talking to him, Kelly, and Zazel that he didn't know this was going to go down. But clearly, Vince has brought extra muscle there. And Shawn grabs the belt, walks out. He's kind of playing like he didn't know, and then very just like awkwardly like poses like this at the top of the ramp as they go off the air. You knew something was amiss. Even as a 15-year-old kid, I'm like, this is not right. And I remember waiting for my dial-up internet to slowly go on that night so I could go on the internet and just start checking like random whatever chat rooms were available, whatever newsletters were coming in. I think it was either Yahoo Search or Alta Vista at the time, because there was no Google yet, or Google maybe may have been in its infancy. And just knowing something was really amiss, and knowing for the next few days as the information kept coming out about Bret not wanting to do the job and all that, like, this has lived in infamy right up to this day. And this is 25 years later, and here we are still talking about it, right? When I said, you know, blow-off matches started happening at Survivor Series in the 90s, this is what I mean, right? This is the quintessential blow-off match, right? I mean, a lot of emotions running through my head as I remember sitting there as a teenager, unable, like, knowing what had happened, but not wanting to process it. Right?
And what
like,
made
I think
this,
I was literally your son's age when I saw.
Yeah, and I remember, because at this point I was into wrestling, because I'll be honest, the NWO, when Hall and Nash came out, and you know, that relaunched realism in wrestling. Okay, so that got me back into like, oh, I'm gonna watch this WCW, because I remember I was a vendor for a music company, and we did video computer software videos and music and all that good stuff. And we do chain retailers. And one of the guys at a store was working in the garden center. He's like, hey, you like wrestling, right? And I'm like, oh, I used to watch it all the time as a kid. He's like, you got to watch WCW. He's like, you got to find out about the NWO. And I'm like, hooked. So then you start watching WWE, which is WWF at the time. And I liked Austin. I'm like, Bret Hart's there, Shawn Michaels there. I'm like, oh, let's, you know, Undertaker's still there. I remember watching this pay-per-view, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, I knew Vince owned the WWE for a while, and, you know, I knew that's why he was the commentator. But, you know, if you're going to screw somebody, do it at the end so that you can go off the air. So it almost makes you go, am I being worked here? Are they trying to be smart? And just such a way of it made Bret look bad after all those years that he had dedicated to the WWE. It makes Shawn Michaels look bad. It makes Vince look bad. It makes just the whole company look bad that this happens.
Yes.
I don't know who came up with it. You know, Jim Cornette says, you know, hey, there was a time when so-and-so screwed somebody to get the belt off. You know, Vince should have not had the belt on Bret if he knew he was going to, you know, let him go to WCW. Let Bret lose to Undertaker. Let Bret lose to somebody that he trusts.
Yes.
You don't have to have it be Shawn Michaels. I mean, Bret had to fix his legs so that Shawn could put him in the sharpshooter.
Yeah, he recrossed his leg the right way and triggered his own screw job. Right?
And, you know, and then the boys in the back can get mad because, you know, now you don't trust the booker. And you're going, what's going to happen? I'm going to get out of the WWE.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, there's a story there that Bruce Pritchard once said, and sorry, Dale, here it is. Montreal Screwjob, Cultaholic did a great 1-hour documentary on it. And I remember thinking, really? We got this? Haven't we talked this into the ground? And they did a really great job on it, Cultaholic Wrestling. And Pure Wrestling TV, I understand that, you know, Vince didn't burn his business to the ground. We're well aware of that, but it was one of those things that you didn't know at the time, right? Like if you're watching the screw job unfold and you're watching it in real time, you're almost going, oh, could this be the end for WWE? Because I just wanted to jump to WCW after. Then WWE turned it around with Austin, and it all kind of happened organically. And when that happened, in hindsight, I've gone and said kind of what you said, that it led to the biggest boom in wrestling history. But that's not how Vince envisioned it. He envisioned himself going face and saying Bret screwed Bret and running with it. He didn't plan the thing with the feud with Austin. When that happened and his own fellow bookers were saying, you got to do the feud with Austin, then it became the biggest boom period in history. And in hindsight, we can absolutely say that it was the right thing, like it was the right thing to create the Mr. McMahon character, the right platform to create the Mr. McMahon character. Well, famously, sorry, go ahead.
To pure wrestling, think about this. If Eric didn't screw around with Bret for a month or 2 months and gets him on Monday Nitro the next day after this and lets him cut a 10-minute promo on why the WWE is a piece of garbage, because fans would switch back and forth during this time.
Yes.
And you let him cut that promo on there, that buries WWE. Because Vince didn't have, he had The Undertaker that was the established WWE star, but he had brought in a bunch of new folks that still had not gotten over. You got to think at this point, The Rock wasn't, over yet.
I was about to say that. Yes.
And Austin, yes, was catching fire and there was something there, but you need to have a heel for Austin to fight with. Shawn Michaels not in the best headspace. He even said, his drug problem, everything else, his body was breaking down. They were even concerned when he lost to Austin at WrestleMania if he was even going to do the job.
Taker taped up his fists and basically waited backstage. If you don't drop the belt, I'm going to drop you. Yeah, and Pure Wrestling TV agrees with us here that he was handed the gold. He was handed gold with Bret coming in at the moment and screwed it up royally. And to add to your point there, I remember in '97 why Bret leaving was such a big deal was because you're right. First off, The Rock had just left the Rocky Maivia gimmick literally like 3 months before this, maybe 2 months before this, right?
Yep.
And Austin won back the Intercontinental title that night from Owen Hart in Montreal, right? His neck was, it was never 100% again, but bear in mind that was like a 4-minute match because that's all Austin could give. He wasn't like, he had caught enough fire to start running with the ball, but they still had him in the Intercontinental title scene, not the world title scene, and he was badly injured, right? The Undertaker was your established guy. Sid was nowhere to be found at the time. I think he was gone already. And Triple H had not been built up.
Yeah, and Triple H, he got in trouble for the curtain call
previous year, so and he was coming out of the burial.
You lost, you lost the 1, 2, 3 Kid, you lost Diesel, and you lost Razor Ramon. So you didn't have the established star power.
Nope.
And then you take your 2 biggest stars and you make them look like clowns,
like that, right? And on top of that, Kane had just debuted in the month before. So he wasn't established yet. Mankind, they hadn't done the big Hell in a Cell. Like he was obviously a good enough main eventer, but he wasn't always in that spotlight. And
Vince didn't have faith in him at that point.
No, he didn't.
Remember, Vince didn't get faith in Mankind until he cut that promo with JR. And then he got it.
I think he may have cut the promo right before the
Survivor. He was still dressed as the Brown Mankind because he was still doing the boiler room matches and stuff like that.
I feel like
happened after.
We got to check the timeline because I have a feeling that he cut the promo right before, but there wasn't enough time to build him to that point. It maybe we will have to check our timelines. But the other big thing that launched Mankind was the '98 King of the Ring and the Hell in a Cell. That hadn't happened yet. So when the screw job happened, we're thinking this is the end of WWE. You've made your Bret's gone. No one's going to trust Shawn going forward. There's no believable champion out there other than The Undertaker. And The Undertaker has since gone on record and basically said, I should have put my hand up and said, let Bret drop the belt to me and we'll figure something out after. If he had done that, maybe the screw job doesn't happen. I'm not sure. Because Bret probably would have done the favors for Taker.
Yep.
Right?
He even said he would.
He even said he would, yeah.
I'll
And
drop it to this person, this person, this person, this person.
mhm. And they were trying to
But
build up
like,
Ken
no.
Shamrock. They were trying to build up Ahmed Johnson, but there wasn't a lot sticking yet to the walls at the time. So, and Jim Largo, we'll get into this in a bit about whether or not management's doing a good job to right the ship. But I think a lot of us are happy with what Triple H has been doing, but it's not perfect yet. Probably never will be perfect because we're in an era where smart fans will never really look at perfection. Never see things perfect. I mean, anyway.
Well, smart fans are the problem.
That's true.
I mean,
yeah, you and I act like smart fans at times, but we're willing to listen, right?
Yeah, but when you let me give me my rant. Fans today used to boo and cheer the faces and heels, and you used to see heat. I mean, when you would have old ladies try to shiv the heel coming to the coming from the ring, or you hear stories of people getting shot, that's heat. Today's crowd, it's all about chanting "Holy shit" or "This is awesome." It's about them
fight forever.
Yes, it's about them putting themselves over instead of understanding that you're there to cheer or boo the talent in the ring, not yourself. And we've programmed ourselves as smarks, as we call them, smart marks, to where big spots are all we care about instead of the little things, the details. And guys like Dave Meltzer and some of the other ones who use these star rating systems, I'm sorry, but when a Kenny Omega match gets more stars than Steamboat versus Flair, that's something wrong, because that was freaking gold back in the day. You go back and watch that match and you can understand how good both of those guys were. And they were doing hour-long matches in every town that they went to. Fans need to understand that we don't need to put ourselves over. We need to put the talent over. It's okay to know that it's predetermined. It's okay to know that they're not trying to kill one another, but damn it, give those people the respect they deserve when they're in their rings, sacrificing their bodies.
So
and quit putting ourselves over just because, we think it's cool.
So,
sorry.
You know what? And TJC, I mean, can you imagine if all the other main event wrestlers left based on how they treated Bret? I mean, Mankind tried to. I mean, he basically went on hiatus for a few days after.
You gotta think at that point, Bret and Shawn and Undertaker were truly their main event wrestlers that they could depend on.
Mm-hmm.
The Bulldog was not. He never got to that level, but he was still in the Hart Foundation. Owen, they were trying to get him to that level, but he could never find the character instead of just being Owen. Triple H was still growing. Austin
Rock
was
still
coming
growing
from being the ringmaster to being Stone Cold Steve Austin because, Vince gave him a really bad gimmick and then, they put him out on his own. At this time, 1997, it was really a bad time for WWE. That was like the verge when, they could have went under, and you take your biggest star and you screw him over in front of your whole fan base.
Well, yeah. And on the topic of the brother Owen there, I mean, such a sad story. Can you imagine if he had had a chance to go through the end of the Attitude Era and live through part of the Ruthless Aggression Era? Owen versus Guerrero, Owen versus Angle, Owen versus Benoit, Owen versus Jericho. Like, I'm not sure that I would have ever seen Owen as like the flagship poster boy of the company, but could he have been a transitional champion for a 3-month period just to reward loyalty, exciting matches? I could see him with the belt. I could have seen him as a world champion for a short period.
I think Owen always had the ability to be a baby face that people could really get behind.
Yes.
Listening to wrestlers talk about Owen, he had the best sense of humor. He was, like a Piper-esque kind of one-liner type of guy.
Yes.
I think what held Owen back is he was Bret's brother, and he always lived in that shadow.
There's that, but they also needed to get some distance because Bret and Shawn, they were not the biggest guys, and Owen was even smaller. They hadn't gotten to embrace the Guerreros and the Jerichos as title holders yet. Bret and Shawn were the first two, and then people kind of piled on that. And Owen would have been part of that crowd. And I could have seen him winning a pay-per-view with like a No Way Out and then dropping it at like a King of the Ring or something like that. Like I could see him having a short reign of sorts.
Well, that's because Vince couldn't use the guys who are on the roids, you know, the gigantic bodybuilder,
the whole scandal.
That's what Vince had his, you know, fetish for. And you even look at how he was booking, you know, before he was, you know, fired or moved out for his little issues. But, you know, it's always these gigantic behemoth people he's always had this fixation on, instead of looking at like the Steve Austin. Austin can talk. He had good look. He could wrestle before he hurt his neck, but, you know, he could get over. The Rock's the same thing. That's what you need, is that person who can connect with the audience and make you want to watch them
every single week as the poster boy. Yeah. Oh man. Sorry, just going through a lot of thoughts right now as we go through these memories and all the wrestlers, and I'm like, but I could be here for hours.
Now, last night, because you know, we both loved the Bloodline versus the Brawling Brutes and Kevin Owens and
Drew and Pete Dunne. Not
Pete
Butch.
Dunne.
Pete Dunne. Not Butch.
I refuse to call him Butch. It's Pete Dunne, because that man is a hell of a talent.
Yep.
The end of that match, that little, the little details that they put in it, how Sammy grabbed the ref's arm.
Yes.
He didn't hit Owens. He grabbed the ref's arm, so he didn't hit his friend. And he looks Roman right dead in the eyes like, I told you I'm part of this family. And Roman's still looking at him like, boy, you got to prove it. And Kevin Owens looking at him like, what the hell?
But he's on the other team. You know he's going to help that team. But anyway, I know. There's still a build-up.
It's that grabbing the ref's arm that was just perfect. It's like, damn, I've never seen that. Like, I know I've seen it, but I'm like,
not in that build-up and emotion. And the way he grabbed it, he didn't just grab his wrist. He like pulled him back and hugging at him. And he's looking at Roman like, see. Right. Yeah, the storytelling was really good. Like, I'll remember Sammy for that moment.
But even the build up to it, you know, that they used SmackDown where Kevin and Sammy were talking, and then Sammy lied to Jay, and, you know, and then Roman confronts him at the pay-per-view, and then Roman gives him that hug, but he's looking in the camera like, I don't trust you. And I mean, it's those layers that they just kept building. Mm-hmm. And then when Sammy gave him the low blow and then kicked him and then gave Jay the pin, it's like, you just set a great feud of Kevin Owens and Sammy again. You can have Drew go after Roman another time. The Usos and Sikoa can fight the Brawling Brutes. I mean, it helps move that story along a little bit more. It was really good.
Yeah. Between that being a great ending to the pay-per-view, but also the Austin Theory, Bobby Lashley, Seth Rollins, the ending for anyone who didn't see it last night. And I know some of these names may be lost on people, although no, I think most people in the chat will know Bobby Lashley. Rollins has Austin Theory up in a suplex position because he's going for that Falcon Arrow finisher. Lashley goes and spears Rollins, but Lashley's out of gas. He's gassed by this point. Theory falls on Rollins, gets the 3 count, wins the U.S. title because of Lashley spearing Rollins. It was quite the smart booking finish. Like, I see Triple H's fingerprints all over that one, you know, and it's not a dusty finish type of thing. It's a clean finish with baggage tacked to the end. You keep Lashley looking strong. You don't fully bury Rollins because he's about to hit his finisher and somebody else comes in. You still put the junior guy, Austin Theory, over. Everybody wins in that scenario. You know what I mean? And welcome the Peppermint Oil Capsule and Space Commander crew. And I don't know, Pericles. Depending who does the spear, I still like it. You know, if a guy my size tried to do the spear, okay, I get that it wouldn't be a good finisher, but a guy like Lashley's size, I can still get behind it, right? So,
And most of the guy, like when Goldberg did it, it was because of his football background.
that's
Roman's the
right.
same thing. He was a
That's
linebacker.
right. And Goldberg did use it as a setup move, to be fair, but I think Pericles just doesn't like the idea of it being a full-on finisher, which I know it doesn't. It has a lot of impact, but it doesn't have that same wow factor as a lot of other finishers, and requires the announcer to go spear in order to sell it. Like, it relies on the announcer to sell it a little bit more, unless of course you're doing it, off the apron through a burning table or something like that. But then it sells itself. Maybe you disagree on that, but I don't mind the spear, but it depends on how it's executed.
And I think we've got to just understand too that we've been desensitized to some of these moves. When I can watch somebody do a Canadian destroyer, on the ring apron, and then watch the guy jump up 30 seconds later like nothing's wrong, when he should be in a coma, on a gurney being stretchered out to the ambulance, but yet a roll up will get him from 1, 2, 3. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to touch on that now that reminds me of something, since you mentioned the Canadian destroyer off the apron, because you were talking about, I think, Steamboat versus Flair a little while ago, and how that gets lower stars than, let's say, a Kenny Omega match. I think what it is it depends on what you value. Flair versus Steamboat in the old Jim Crockett promotion days, or the early WCW days, there was a buildup. It had that big fight boxing feel.
Mm-hmm.
You were like, I can't wait till they get in the ring. It was a lot of storytelling. There was a lot of just looking at those wrestlers, and when they did a move, every move mattered. You live in an era now, or we live in an era now, where it's about the spot fest. It's about how many false finishes, how can we pop the crowd? It's a different era where the storytelling, the buildup isn't quite the same. There's no big fight feel anymore by comparison. Like, say what we will about Jon Moxley versus MJF, right? That does not have the feel of the big fight match. You're looking for that. Yes, it is the big match of the night, but you're looking at all the other matches that are happening that night. You're looking at how many spots, how many surprises. Wow me, wow me, wow me. It isn't enough just for two big names to come to the ring, built and based on storyline, because back then we didn't have as much competing for our attention.
I'm gonna call absolute BS on this right now.
Okay, go.
I'm gonna call absolute BS on
Go.
this.
That's why you're here. You're here to balance me out. Go.
UFC does it all the freaking time, and they have how many more people that watch their stuff? You can have the NFL talk about, these two teams are a rivalry and people will turn in for it. That's just bullshit. It's because you have the modern day wrestler that doesn't know how to put on a match anymore. They don't have the learning ability. They haven't learned how to do it, because everything in the indies is about spots. It's about getting YouTube views. It's about getting a tweet. It's about, the crowd. I hate to say this, but it's almost like, the wrestlers are trying to just get the crowd worked up for a big pop. Put on a damn show that makes sense. You can look. Today's wrestlers are the most athletic wrestlers we have ever seen. These folks have the ability to do stuff that just blows your mind. If you do a Canadian destroyer, but yet their finish is a roll-up, that there's no sense to that. You have a finishing move, which is the end. Jake Roberts used the DDT, and you would hear the announcer say, if he gets that DDT in, it's over. And he could get it out of nowhere. That man had a 20-plus year career because of that one move. Randy Orton, the RKO, can get over. But if you don't think a big match can sell out a pay-per-view just by that match, you're absolutely crazy. MJF versus CM Punk.
Okay, fair enough.
You didn't, WrestleMania, Steve Austin coming back to fight Kevin Owens. Was it something that made people watch?
Yeah.
You don't think a Roman Reigns versus The Rock would make people watch? How about The Rock versus John Cena?
Hold on a second, though. You're talking about bringing stars back from the past, even CM Punk. that was an era where big fight matches were more possible. There's very few big match attractions these days. Like you look at UFC as an example there. And I like this part of the discussion because this is where you and I don't agree. And this is part of the fun, right? Conor McGregor, he could sell out, but does Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje, does that have the same impact? Not quite. I like both as fighters. Everyone does. But they're looking at the rest of the card as well, right? As opposed to like, it's the exception now. The big fight match is the exception now, not the rule. When was the last massive UFC that kind of blew the wheels off everything? I think it was Khabib versus Conor 4 years ago. And
but you gotta, but to this point, Conor can talk people into watching. That's a big fight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm talking about. You can have guys who can talk people into watching their match. That is what a good pro wrestler can do.
Fair enough.
Flair can talk people into watching. Dusty could.
Hogan, yes. But who can these days? Because you're talking Roman versus The Rock. You're bringing back a star from yesterday. You know, Austin versus Owens. You're bringing back a star from yesterday. Or maybe we're talking about the same. Maybe we're converging to the same point here, where it's the stars of today don't have that ability to bring it in. But you can still have that match under the right circumstances. Maybe we're coming at this from different angles and we're arriving at the same point.
See, MJF can talk somebody in to watching them a pay-per-view.
Okay.
Because MJF can piss people off enough to where you want to go. I just want to see him get his ass kicked.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
How about him and Wardlow? People wanted to watch that match. And Wardlow wasn't, that was all MJF. He talked people into watching that match.
You know, that's probably why that Wardlow dropped the TNT title, because they probably want to build up a Revolution pay-per-view of MJF versus Wardlow, because that was a squash the first time they fought. And now MJF's the champion.
But what modern wrestlers lack today is they have all this athletic ability. They just don't know how to sell themselves to the fans, because it's all about doing 75 super kicks, or, having Don Callis come into the ring and, 69 with you, or tell people that you're the belt collector, or, Kenny Omega is absolutely gifted. And when he was on his heel run, people wanted to see him get his ass kicked because of the fact that he was healing up beautifully. He just never had that baby face that people could get behind.
Yes.
That kept getting screwed until it was that big blow-off match where they're in a steel cage. Kenny can't get away, and then Kenny loses. That's what you need to get back to, is building those proper matches to those big pay-per-views where people, look, 750 to 1 million people watching, whether it's AEW or Raw, or 2 or 3 million on Fox. That's not sustainable for wrestling. And to get those fans, you got to have a reason for them to tune in. It has to be must watch TV.
Right. Okay.
That's
fair
what
enough.
we need to get back to. Are you going to watch Raw on Monday night to see what Sammy has to say and what Kevin Owens does?
Would that be Raw or SmackDown? Would that be Raw or SmackDown, though?
Oh, I'm sorry. It would be SmackDown. But you're going to probably turn into Raw just to see if Kevin Owens has something to say.
Yes.
Because you wanted to know.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I think we ended up converging at the same point here, even if we started on opposite ends of the spectrum on that one, because you're right. To be fair, though, I don't think anyone's kicked out of Kenny Omega's One-Winged Angel yet. So there might be something there. But Kenny Omega's cut from a different cloth entirely.
Yeah, but with a finisher, you shouldn't be kicking out of it. It should be a situation where if they do kick out of a finisher, it's because, whoever performed the move didn't cover them quick enough. There's a reason why it happened, instead of just these false finishes. It's lazy booking.
Okay. Speaking of finishes, I actually, I don't know why, I dreamt last night about Monti versus Hitman in Slaughterhouse Wrestling Championship, and you giving a better promo than me. If anyone's wondering what we're talking about, because Zazel's doing his Slaughterhouse Wrestling Championship, I'm voicing the Hitman. Ryan's voicing the Mountie, and I dreamt about it last night. I don't know why, I just did.
But how much fun was that going back and forth cutting promos?
I had so much. I've never had that much fun on a collaboration in my life. Even when I collaborate with other people for my own channel, I haven't had that much fun ever.
But that built up the excitement. Now I'm like, Zazel, will you finish this? Because I just want to see what happens. I want to see who wins. But that's what used to happen. You would get that build up like, damn, I got to see who's going to win this. I want to know. And
well, speaking of build up, you kind of made me the heel in that because you built up the Mountie. You took that sniveling Mountie type character, added a little bit of that Jimmy Hart ratness to him, and then made it an underdog story. Like, I come from nothing and I don't need anything, but I'm going to come take down who you are, you spoiled, rich kid who had everything handed to you. And I kind of was backed into a corner where I had to be like, I don't know what to say, but I'm going to say you're not in my league. And I'm going to threaten to break your legs. And I give these promos, and it's kind of like I had to put Bret Hart on a heelish pedestal. And you see how that unfolded just on yours and mine storytelling? Because going into that, Mountie's supposed to be the heel. Hitman's supposed to be the face. And it flips. I don't know if you felt the same as I did, but I kind of felt like I became the heel.
And as a good heel, that's what you do. You make the good guy think they're not good enough. You mentally mess with them to get the advantage. That's what a good heel is supposed to do.
But as the underdog, the way you gave the promo, I kind of felt like it was the only way I could react. I was sitting there, I'm like, Bret's usually the underdog, but there's no like Mountie costing him a match and Bret trying to get revenge. I don't have that, because if they did a Bret versus Mountie feud today, that's how it would go. Like, Mountie probably cost him a match, and Bret has that to give in his promos. I didn't have that going in. So all I knew is that Hitman's the bigger name. Hitman has the richer family history. That's all I could play off of. And I'm like, if I have to go heel, I will, because this is Slaughterhouse Wrestling Championship. This isn't 1993 WWE. I have no choice. I got to run with it. And like, you look at the history of Hitman versus the Mountie, the whole Quebecers thing versus the Hart brothers is what kicked off Owen versus Bret.
Yep.
Right? And Bret was a sympathetic character. He was the one everyone felt for throughout the whole feud with the Quebecers and with Owen. So I like how you flip that on its head. And I was like, I'm not going to turn this around and try to convince everybody he's the heel and I'm the face. I'm going to run with it because I can give a better promo that way. It'll make the Mountie seem less like an underdog because there's a story to tell, right? So I'm just intrigued to see how this goes.
Well, and I got a lot of that from, like John Cena is the proverbial good guy. Hustle, loyalty, respect. Best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. I saw so many similarities between those two characters, and people turned on John Cena because he's Superman.
Yes.
And people like CM Punk because he's more Batman.
Yes.
People like flawed heroes more so than they like perfect heroes.
You know how many people are actually cheering for Mountie to win this? This would never happen in the early 90s WWE. Your Mountie would be booed all the way to the ring. But when I heard your promos, I'm like, I kind of want him to win too. But I'm going to help you tell the story, right? And it's kind of like Mountie's got nothing to lose going into this. Because if he passes out from the sharpshooter, he accomplished his goal. If he wins, he accomplishes his goal. I kind of feel like Bret's backed into a corner here. How you did that to me, I'll never know, but I love it. And how I had to get creative to roll with it, because this did not go in the direction I thought it was going to go.
And that's what heels need to do. It's the MJF, I'm the devil.
Yes.
I made you believe. Your hero that you cheered on for, you turned on him.
Yes.
All of you turned on him. I worked you all. You were all idiots. And I proved it.
Yes.
Oh, I want that. I'm going to kill you heat. That's what you have to do as the bad guy.
Yes, absolutely. I know we could keep talking about this, and maybe there'll be more time at the end. I think Zazel's going to air that in in the next week or so. So I can't wait to see how it turns out. But before this ends, I do want to talk a bit about the introduction of the Elimination Chamber as a key Survivor Series memory. Do you remember this 2002 Survivor Series?
I love the Elimination Chamber. I think, and this just might be me, I think it just got overused. It lost some of that specialness.
Mm-hmm.
But man, look at the people you have in this match. Michaels, RVD, Booker T, Triple H, Jericho, and Kane.
Yes.
All great workers. All have their gimmick. They know what they can do. And they tore down the house with this. And it was such a different type of match. It was really good. I enjoyed this particular match so much.
Yes. And this is like, I don't think this is considered modern wrestling anymore. It had the big production feel of modern wrestling. And speaking of big fight feel, this had a big fight feel to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It was part of Shawn Michaels' comeback story. This match had a lot of storytelling. You had anyone could win. And if any of these 6 men walked out with the belt, like, you couldn't predict who was going to win the belt. Triple H was virtually unstoppable at the time. Shawn was completing a Cinderella story. The other 4 guys were all legit main eventers and legit title holders and had all held a world title of some sort, in some fashion or another. And yeah, it was 20 years ago, but it feels like modern wrestling today when you watch it back. And a lot of people consider this the best Survivor Series ever because of this match.
Yeah, and RVD could do stuff that nobody else could do. High flyer, and this match gave him an opportunity to showcase his skills. This match allowed all of these guys to showcase what abilities they had. Kane with the power, Triple H the cerebral assassin, Jericho just being that wild card, Booker T, athletic, just can light the world on fire when he wants to. And of course, Shawn Michaels is, Mr. WrestleMania. He's the underdog on his redemption story that you wanted to see win. All great things that make this. And again, it's that this is a new type of match. And if you do it in small doses, it can mean something. It goes back to, Hell in the Cell, with Mick Foley and Undertaker. I think the perfect ending to that is when Mick Foley got choke slammed through the cell into the floor. They end the match right there. That makes both of them look strong. It makes Mick Foley look, indestructible. But with this, the Elimination Chamber, it got over so well. Then they're like, oh, let's do this as a pay-per-view, and we'll have 7 matches in the Elimination Chamber. And then it just kind of lost its
watered it down a bit.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But again, the folks you had in here were all established veterans who had learned their craft. They knew what they could do. They knew what their limitations were, and they stayed to what their strengths were, and they built the match around all of that. And it was just so good. Absolutely amazing.
Yes, and it's like Money in the Bank. All of a sudden, they make it its own pay-per-view, and maybe it waters it down a little bit, but I think they just want everyone to anticipate the big structure coming down, because the Elimination Chamber, they said that the steel was very unforgiving in the Elimination Chamber. Right. So I don't know, like this to me is a very rewatchable pay-per-view, more so than the 97 Screwjob, because how that one goes down and how it ends. But this one's a feel-good story with a lot of anticipation. 6 guys putting on the best wrestling they possibly could.
And, the 97, I think that was a great Survivor Series until the end.
Yeah, actually it was. It was pretty good. It was pretty good. Yeah, I can't disagree with that whatsoever. Man, so as somebody who watches modern wrestling, can you recommend people to keep going, like to keep watching modern wrestling today? I know my answer to this, but you watch with your son.
Yeah, so Darby Allin, I think, is one of the most underrated talents that I've ever seen. The kid looks like a car crash everywhere he goes. I wish he would get a better push in AEW. Austin Theory, we talked about him earlier. He's got the looks. He's got the ability to sell. He can talk. I think with the new, meaner, nastier character is just going to help him. I think, honestly, though, turning him to a face at some point is going to be the moneymaker for him.
For Theory or
MJF.
for yeah, okay. Sorry, keep talking for a second. I'm just gonna step aside for like 2 seconds.
No, MJF is another great talent to watch if you're, into the modern wrestling, because he is just pure evil. He can work people into a fury. And as much as I bag on Kenny and the Bucks, athletically, Kenny Omega is an amazing wrestler. I would just love to see him learn the gimmick and make himself the superstar that he could be. If you're looking, back to WWE, I think, Braun Breaker is going to be a very strong wrestler in the future. He's, Rick Steiner's son. So he has that pedigree. Pete Dunne, Gunther, who should be called Walter again, is another great WWE wrestler, puts on pretty strong matches. For AEW, I really would love to see Jungle Boy get a little bit of a better run. I would love to see him not have scripted promos, because Jack Perry, when you see him in interviews, he's really relaxed and he's very articulate in how he can express himself. And if he can bring that into wrestling, I think it's going to be tremendous positive for all of us, because we'll be able to see that. Dr. Britt Baker has to be one of the best women's wrestlers right now. I would love to see her be able to face somebody like a Sasha Banks, a Charlotte, a Becky Lynch, a Bayley, somebody like that could really go with her. She just seems to be stuck with more newer, greener talent that they're still learning their craft, and it would probably help if they could get a little bit more experience. I think for AEW, the best thing for them is if they could do some sort of house shows where their talent can get more experience in the ring and become better.
Yes, absolutely.
And then for WWE, let your wrestlers be who they are and quit giving them gimmicks that suck, names that suck, and just let them be who they can be. And that's what's going to make a winner for a promotion. Sorry,
man. Yeah, I know I missed a little part of that, but thanks for taking over for a second. There, look, I mean, you might have said some of these thoughts already, but with regards to like modern wrestling, the reason I tune into AEW is it's something different. Right. It gives me an alternative when I got jaded with WWE, but with the new booking committee and the sort of revamped storytelling that WWE has gotten, they have a chance to make wrestling great again. And depending who you talk to, some people will say it's still great, and it never was not great. Again, that depends on your mileage, and I felt that WWE relied way too much on Roman. Maybe a lot of people feel this way in the past few years, lacking the ability to build other stars. But that's going to change, right? Like we talked about that great U.S. title last night. We talked about the way Sami Zayn, how he finished the night really strong. We've talked here about MJF. I mean, we could have another pseudo boom period in wrestling. Now, it's going to depend on a lot of factors. Right, but I think the potential is there more than it's been in the past years.
And I think what the problem is, and with Vince, and in my opinion, Vince has ruined wrestling because of what he did. He killed the territories, which stopped guys and girls from being able to develop who they are. Best example is Cody Rhodes has all the ability in the world to be an amazing superstar, but Cody needed to figure out who the hell he was. And he couldn't do that in the WWE. It's not only until he went out on the indies and had to learn who Cody Rhodes was. Vince tries to create the stars when it's the fans who tell you who they want to get behind. And when you have somebody like Austin Theory, who people start going, we like that kid, that's when you need to start giving him a little bit of a push. Sami Zayn, if you remember at WrestleMania, he wrestled the Jackass guys, and he had to put over the biggest, stupidest gimmick match in the world. And that could have killed his career. But now they're allowing him to be Sammy with the bloodline, and he's probably one of the most over baby faces that there is. The fans will tell you who they want to get behind. You just, as the booker, or whoever's doing the scripting, you need to know when to help develop those characters and not bury them with crappy gimmicks or crappy storylines. Let that organically develop so people can continue to get behind them. The Bray Wyatt thing right now is taking forever to go through, but I think that's refreshing because you don't know what's coming next.
Yes. And you touched on Cody Rhodes there. What I wanted to say is that there were a lot of people who didn't follow AEW, but they watch WWE with their kids. I know you follow both, but a lot of people, they got WWE Network to watch with their kids. And one of the things that I told people a lot was, man, AEW is good. When Cody came back, a lot of fans, like, I was talking to somebody who hadn't seen Cody Rhodes in 6 or 7 years. And when he watched the WrestleMania entrance of Cody, and it's like, this is not the Cody that left us 6 years ago. He came in, he walks like a star, he looks like a star, his music is better. There's a lot more to get behind with Cody Rhodes today. And it's like, man, this is not dashing Cody Rhodes. This is not Stardust. This is a completely different guy who reinvented himself in New Japan and AEW. It's just unfortunate he got injured before that last Hell in a Cell. We're hoping to see him back at the Rumble. Right. But
yeah, but even with that injury, I think that helped fans gain more respect for him because he did come out and he did perform, and they put on one hell of a match. Him and Seth, they tore that structure down, and they did such a great job with it.
mm-hmm.
AEW has some of the best talent in professional wrestling right now. They're younger stars who they should be building the company around, have all the ability in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Where they are lacking right now is either Tony Khan is too green with being a booker, he has people in his ear who are not telling him the right things, or he's just trying to do too much and he needs to let go of some of this stuff. If Jeff Jarrett shouldn't be wrestling in the ring at AEW, Tony needs to hand over the booking to Jeff Jarrett. And
Jarrett has a lot going for him. Yeah.
Yeah, but
but not in the ring. Like, I never liked Jarrett as a wrestler, so yeah.
But he knows the Memphis style of booking, and he could help. AEW is, I've heard it described as a circus. There's something for everybody. But as with every circus, there's sensory overload because there's just so much crap going on.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have a limited amount of TV, and you have certain guys and gals that you need to start putting over. That doesn't include, 8-on-8 tag team matches, or a referee who just stands in the corner and lets people do whatever the hell it is they want. Eddie Kingston, he had that article come out where he talked about his mental health issues and different things, and he was getting over with the fans like nobody else, and he was catching fire. That's when Tony should have said, we need to put him into some sort of program where we can continue to build on this. Instead, he got stuck with Jericho, and in my opinion, Jericho has turned into Hogan from WCW, where he takes those young guys who are getting over, and he literally just sucks the life out of them, and he comes out better, and they come out worse.
And we've had disagreements on how we feel about Jericho, just because I still love that Judas entrance. It just never got old for me. But you're thinking more how he's booked. I'm thinking more just the spectacle of everyone singing Judas as they all come to the ring. Sorry, as he comes to the ring. And about Tony Khan, I think the issue with him is he's a fan like the rest of us, and it's like you always see that in him. He's the fan first, more so than he is the booker. You see the few times he gets on the mic when he was making the Ring of Honor announcement, how excited he got. And we're like, that's just me in the ring talking with a microphone. That's not, he doesn't have that Vince edginess to him, So
he shouldn't be out in front announcing.
Yes.
He shouldn't be doing media scrums.
Yes.
He can be a fan, but he can't be the face of AEW. He needs to have somebody else that does that.
Absolutely. Well,
because
yeah.
Well, this is my only point. It puts him in a bad situation.
It does.
Because
damned if he does, damned if he
then
doesn't.
The criticism starts falling out. Pardon.
Mm-hmm. I was like, damned if he does, damned if he doesn't kind of thing.
Well, and I get that fans go, look, he's one of us, and I'm going to support him because he's one of us.
Mm-hmm.
But man, you've got so much talent. Give them an opportunity to really shine. Give the Acclaimed an opportunity to do something else than just an entrance with scissoring with Billy Gunn. Give them some big wins. Like, they're both athletic as hell, and they are amazing, wrestlers. Give them some of those, hero wins, and then that just makes that even better going forward.
Fair enough. And we could do a whole stream on AEW right now.
And Jabari needs to give the women more time. Give me women wrestlers in AEW who don't botch every 15 seconds because they're so green. Jade Cargill looks like $1 million, sounds like $1 million, but she needs more work, more time.
And we all love Britt Baker, right? Like, if she could still have the title, I'd be happy. But that would get a bit old. So
put her and Jamie Hayter together. I think they could tear down the house. But Saraya is 5 or 6 years removed from her last match, and
yes,
she got blown up pretty quick because everything.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry.
No, it's fine. It's all good. Yeah. I mean, we're basically reaching the end point here with where we were talking Survivor Series and just going off and talking about wrestling, but we're going to need to keep going on wrestling at some point in time. I am sorry that Justin wasn't able to join us today. This is a good point right here. Toni Storm.
Yes. Right. Tony's a great talent.
Yes. I don't like her theme music, so it's no Judas when she comes to the ring, but yes, she's a great talent for sure. Shida brings that New Japan style, but of course they haven't done much with her. But anyway, you know what? If anyone's watching this on the replay, be sure to give us your favorite Survivor Series memory in the comment section below. I think we basically come to. Have we closed out our thoughts, or is there anything you want to put out there?
Last night's Survivor Series War Game crossover was really good.
Yes.
I hope this will continue to be a sign of good things to come.
Absolutely.
We went back to being something important again.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Hey, look, thanks everyone for joining us today. Thanks Ryan from the Island of Misfit Toy Collectors for joining us, and hopefully your son has a great game where he's at right now. And tune into the Slaughterhouse Wrestling Championship if you want to see on Sergeant Slaughterhouse. If you want to see me and Ryan go at it promo-wise and see how the blow-off match goes. And with that, I think we'll cut it off here. And I'll see you again soon with some more toy talk. Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.